Welcome back, crew. We are still diving through the tons of content that came out this Gen Con, and one of the cool ones that were released at the con itself was the X-Men expansion to the Marvel Multiverse tabletop RPG. If you've watched this channel before, especially any of the superhero content, you know Marvel is one of my favorites, but the X-Men is my favorite overall property for any superhero comic related material. And I was really excited to see a book that's dedicated to them. So I decided, hey, we're going to take a little time to go through this book and drop a review. Though I highly encourage, if you haven't checked it out already, last August, 2023, after it released at Gen Con as well, the Marvel Multiverse was our tabletop RPG of the month. We did some really great coverage on that, going through how to build a character, going over the core rule set for the system, and a live actual play. So definitely check out that content if you're unfamiliar with the Marvel Multiverse tabletop RPG, or just hang out if you wanted to hear some X-Men goodness and see how they brought that to the table. So we're going to be reviewing this in our usual system, going over kind of our roses, things we enjoyed, buds, things we're hoping to see with the system in the future, as well as thorns, things that may not have clicked with us with this expansion. And with this, I'll say we haven't had a chance to playtest the X-Men expansion rules, but we did get a good chance to go through the Marvel Multiverse system and kind of run that at the table. So pretty good basis to work off of. But I always like to call out when I haven't play tested something directly. So let's dive into it. So biggest rules for this one, especially if you're an X-Men fan, between the initial launch with Marvel Multiverse and then the X-Men expansion, you should have pretty much every major mutant that you'd want to have. You should be able to bring them to the table with the expansion characters included. Now, I was leafing through and I didn't find a major mutant or a mutant that I really enjoyed that was not included in one of those two books. You actually got some pretty obscure mutants in there. So it's a great expansion. They give you some great enemies, some great characters or NPCs you can bring into the adventure. Just a really cool look at the mutant world as a whole. So I think they nailed that part. So if that was one of the if you had the Marvel Multiverse system, but you wanted some more mutants, some more characters to bring in, I'd buy that book for its on its own for that because it gives you some great pre-mades that you can just roll out into your adventures. So big rows on that side, and corresponding with it too. If you're a comic book fan, this thing is great. This book is great for two reasons alone. First, they bring in some amazing comic book art kind of throughout the X-Men's tenure, going from the stuff that came out in the 60s with the OG team all the way up to the Kurokan era. So it's just a kind of a cool look at the X-Men art. It's almost like it's great as an art book as its own, is to be able to go through and flip and just kind of see how the X-Men art has evolved and all that throughout the ages. And also along with that too, it does have a lot of cool lore with it. So they've broken out this book into kind of showing how what mutants are, the X-Men throughout the eras. And when I say throughout the eras, it goes from the 60s all the way to Krogan era, breaking out a lot of like the key areas, like the all new X-Men era, when it kind of uncanny when Claremont took over with that team. It breaks out the like the utopian era with Scott and the mutant kind were trapped on the island off of the coast of San Francisco. It gives a lot of cool pieces just throughout the X Men lore, just to give you ideas as well as adventure hooks and things you'd want to do if you wanted to run in a certain era. So it's great on that side for the game master to read through and kind of experience that and kind of see exactly what they need to tell an X Men story, which they do a really good job too of kind of bringing in the mutant experience and all of that and giving game masters tips on how to bring that mutant experience to the table. But it's really one of those ones. It's great if you want to run an adventure. It's great if you just want to read some cool X-Men stuff too, especially if you want to kind of see how people's powers are brought into a tabletop RPG system. Definitely fun there. Uh, and with that too, this book actually introduced some new powers to the game as well. So a rose for that. One of my favorites I'll call out is they actually brought in a luck manipulation power set now because they brought Domino. I think they brought Longshot into. So they brought in some luck manipulation so you can kind of go through and see how to build up that power in case you wanted to build a custom hero or even use some of the heroes that are already known for their luck already. So big shout outs for those three. One of the other things I will say too is this book does give a lot of adventure hooks. The nice thing too is it gives a lot of detailed lore, especially through the ages for the different teams. So it gives you for the X-Men what you'd expect, but it also breaks down to X Factor, X Force, Alpha Flight, Marauders. There's what I'm missing right now, Exiles. So it gives you what kind of what those teams are, their philosophies, their histories, and then it gives you some two. It breaks the arcs or the adventure hooks into two categories. It gives you general adventure hooks that would fit for kind of most iterations of that team, whether it be one of the latest eras, some of the early eras. But it also gives you kind of tips for bringing in the Kurokan era version of that team, because this came out kind of when what was in development, I should say, while Kuroka was still a big thing. I know that X Men have pivoted away from that recently, but a lot of this kind of the lore and pieces are developed in the Kurokan era. So some cool resources if you want to be current with it, but also if you wanted to do a different era of X Men. I know everybody has their era where they think the X Men was like perfect utopia era for me. I know a lot of people are the Claremont era, so it's gonna depends where you kind of probably started reading comics at, and they give you the tools to be able to bring that era to life as well, which I think is a really good, a big rose for them on that side. And also, just a couple mechanics I want to shout out to for the Rose piece. There's a mutant reputation mechanic, so it kind of shows you how individual, it gives you rules for running how individual people will view mutants and kind of what they'll do on that side. Even incorporating some of the language of mutants, like the top two for ones that would dislike mutants are feared and hated. So I liked how they brought that in there, and it gives you kind of different ways for people to kind of either overcome those kind of biases within those people or even just deal with them, kind of see how that would affect them as the adventure goes through. It kind of some cool and gives tools to make it a cool narrative or RP moment as well. So I like that they included that in there. I think that's the core piece to the X-Men kind of universe and experience, and I really appreciate that they brought a mechanic in to help support that in play. Along with that, too, they have danger room rules as well for kind of creating randomized situations in the danger room or including the danger room within your adventures as well. So that the danger room is like an essential piece of the X-Men. I think the X-Men are always the team that trains probably the most. So I think it's cool that they have that in there, and also kind of along with that, tied into it, they've got like these schooling rules as well because the X-Men are often situated at the school, the Charles Xavier School for gifted students or youngsters. So it allows you to kind of bring in those lore pieces too, and kind of get mechanics into them. One of my favorites was they actually have a different rank up system. If you'd like to use kind of the what are they getting schooled, I think it's called. You could utilize that instead of like the typical experience and rank up system that are included in the Marvel Multiverse. It basically breaks it into 10 categories, and you kind of like anytime you go through an adventure or you do a training session in the danger room, or there's a couple other pieces too, you can fill in one of the 10 sections and you get the bonus from that section. And then once you get all 10, you can kind of go through the usual process of getting a rank up and get anything in addition that you hadn't already gotten from those 10 boxes. So I thought that's cool. I think it's a great way to kind of bring in the X-Men's training and provide mechanics for that too. So yeah, biggest roses I'll say. If I had to put my top three roses, the art, the new characters, as well as some like the additions to the rule set. Because things we haven't mentioned, they also included some new team maneuvers, as well as some great game master tips too for how to build build out your team or have your players build their team out, going from like having a place that they can call home, transportation, kind of the core drama of the team. It's a lot of resources on that side that you could utilize to really just make it feel lived in, like a team that would exist in the Marvel universe. So big shout out there. So let's dive into some of the buds. So with that, we've touched on some of the new things that came out. The thing I would be interested in kind of diving in deeper on are some of like the new equipment that came through. They brought in adamantium, cerebro, some of the Kraken plants and portals. A lot of cool things you could do to spice up, even if you want to tweak them to fit your world a little bit better, or even if you just want to bring them in straight as Marvel has included them. A lot of cool things to spice your adventure up there. One of my favorite rules I saw in there because it's so common, or it's such a staple, I should say, of the X-Men universe. They brought like psychic duel or mental duel rules, I should say. So it goes over how you can have a psychic duel within the system, as well as kind of gives you some tips as a game master to kind of how to structure that in an adventure, whether it be because So your whole team's not going to be psychic. So you could have one person engage in a psychic duel while the team has to defend them from an oncoming wave. And just a lot of cool things that go along with that. 'Cause I think it's a really big flavor, really cornerstone of the X-Men universe. Is hard to go through a run where somebody doesn't have some type of psychic duel. So I'm glad they brought those rules in, so you can really kind of bring that to the table and have some fun with it. So those are kind of the big rules or big buds on that side. There's a lot of additions to the Marvel multiverse, a lot of things you can really flesh out and have some fun with adventures down the line. Now, let's dive into the thorns. I liked out picking this up at Gen Con because they do give you, if you bought it at Gen Con, you get a free subscription or a free digital copy, I should say, within Demiplane as well as Roll20. But typically, if you're going to be buying this afterwards, which most people will be, there is no free digital option with it. There's no way to buy a PDF. If you do want to buy this book, you need to either buy it. You could buy a hard copy of it, or you could buy it through Demiplane or Roll20. And you can utilize kind of it was Roll20 especially. It's easy to share with your players from there. I know that's one of the hardships of the game. That was one of my major thorns with it when the first version came out. I love systems that have a PDF that make it easier for you to share with your players. So they can go through and see the system and see kind of what they want to build in with their PCs. Uh, but the Marvel Multiverse doesn't do that. But I will say their Demiplane site, after having a chance to check it out after Gen Con, very well organized. If you do buy it there, it is really easy to kind of go through and find what you need on the rule set side. And then for Roll20, it is really great if you're going to be playing on that system, which if you're buying it there, you should be, because you get the X-Men when you get maps. I think there's 8 free maps that are, or 8 maps included, I should say, that come along with it. You get all of the tokens for the new characters. I think there's like 80 new characters they introduced here, as well as like their sheets loaded right in there. So it does make it easy to play if you do buy that. But I know I love always having a PDF. Just makes it easier to get players on board. So that is a major thorn for me. And this one's a small thorn. I wouldn't say it's a thorn. This is a personal interesting thing for me, I'll say. It is set in the Kurokan era, so a lot of it is focused on the Kurokan side. They do a good job of giving some other eras as well, but typically it's like the Kurokan will be like the major hooks, and then you'll have like a general hooks that would just fit the team. As I said, everybody has their own era of X-Men, and I wish they could have brought in more hooks for each era. But that's a very minor thorn on my side. Overall, I think they did a great job presenting the eras and giving game masters enough to kind of inspire them and go out and make their own stuff for it too. But overall, it's kind of a quick look through of the Marvel Multiverse X-Men expansion for their tabletop RPG. Highly recommend if you haven't had a chance, check out our existing content. This is a fun one, especially it's a superhero game without a huge barrier of entry to get in and learn the system, which I think is great. I love superhero games. This is one of the ones you don't need to dive in and spend a huge time learning the system or building characters. It's one you can bring to the system with the same ease that you'd bring in like a D&D type system. So I think that's a really major benefit. And I always love seeing more Marvel content out. So check that out. Shout in the comments something that you were curious about the X-Men expansion, or like if you've had a chance to take it out yourself too. But thanks for hanging out, and definitely come through for our latest game of the month, Fallout, as we dive into it this August. But thanks for hanging out, and until next time.